Hello there. Welcome to Fireside Chats with Dr. Dorothy. Today, I'm going to take you on a journey abroad. We were a military family. Frank was active duty, and he was posted to the American Embassy in Muscat, Oman. So we arrived over there. We were relatively new in country, and we'd already lived in Saudi Arabia for 2 years, gone back to Washington, D.C., and then we were posted to the Sultanate of Oman. So, I'd observed a lot of phenomenal change taking place in Saudi Arabia. And as we had been in country in Oman for, maybe a month or two, their National Day celebration came up for their 25th Jubilee anniversary, and it was a big deal. And they were celebrating the fact that the Sultan, who was a visionary leader, he really was visionary, he had taken over from his father, a very backward nation, and he had brought all sorts of resources to the Sultanate. And he had just made great changes that served the people. And so they were living under this, enjoyable environment. And women, in Saudi Arabia, when we were there, women were not allowed to drive. Thank heavens they can now. But in Oman, they could drive. They even had women who were undersecretaries of their ministries, for example. So that was very significant progress. Well, we got invited to National Day celebration, and we went to this huge stadium in Muscat. And we got invited by Dr. Yusuf Shawki, who was Egyptian-born, so Arabic was his mother language, but he was Harvard PhD, brilliant mind. And he had invited us, and he was sitting between Frank and me that day. And as the Sultan spoke to the people, Dr. Shawki was just translating it flawlessly into English for us. And the Sultan was deeply concerned about so much change taking place in their daily lives, about young people not valuing their roots and their seafaring history and deep cultural traditions. And he was concerned about that, and he was challenging people to think about what makes us uniquely Omani. What makes you you? And what makes me me? What makes us uniquely American? That was the parallel I drew that day as these words, as the Sultan's message was being delivered to me from Arabic into English. It was like a light bulb came on in my head. It was like a download, a divine download. And I looked at Dr. Shawki as I listened to the message, and I said, if he's going to accomplish what he's saying here in his speech, and I could hear the sincerity in the message, he's going to have to capture the imagination of his young people, because the computers were just emerging. They were interested in computers and office jobs. They weren't interested in fishing and seafaring, the trade routes, which had been a great part of their history, moving goods from India to Muscat and, the Arab Gulf and over into East Africa. They were interested in all the neat changes and fast cars and things that money can buy. They didn't know what they were at risk of losing, but the Sultan could see it. He was visionary. And so when I said that, Dr. Shawki, who was, like I said, a brilliant man, I don't think he expected a Western female to come up with this idea, but he looked at me in surprise and he said, "How do you know that?" And I said, "I'm an educator. My training is elementary education. My first love is teaching youth." And he said, "Go home and write down your ideas. Write down your ideas and bring them to me." And he had already done some extensive field research in that country, and he'd been recognized by the Sultan. He had received an order of Oman that most civilians and or foreigners do not receive. But he had influence. And so I went home that night, and I was just ecstatic. I could hardly sleep. I had all these ideas rushing through my mind of what could be done. what should be done in order to document these beautiful old crafts that they had. Gorgeous silverwork, hand-carved wooden windows and doors. And I'd already observed that they were taking off those carved wooden windows and doors, and they were using them for firewood and getting metal doors and window coverings and painting them bright colors. And I just thought, what a tragedy. They don't know what they're going to lose. And so I wrote down my ideas. And to make a long story short, I did get a contract with the Ministry of Education to go do field work all over that country. I titled it Oman's National Identity and Education. And it was an amazing, once-in-a-lifetime experience. I went into villages where there were people who had never seen anyone who looked like me. They wanted to touch my hair, they wanted to touch my eyes, but they were greatly respectful, and they were very, very grateful that we were capturing things that reflected their culture, their heritage, their rich traditions, and getting it documented, filmed, videotaped. It was an amazing experience. Do you believe in magic? Do you know your own identity? Can you define American identity? My next video will address some of those issues. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you next week.